My name is Andy Schmuckler. I wish I knew exactly who I was talking to, but let me reach out in as meaningful a way as I can devise. I've spent my life feeling like I had something important to say. Starting in 1970, I had something important to say that bears upon whether human civilization, our species, is going to survive for the long haul. So there was that, and then I reached a time through about a decade, a little bit more, where I didn't feel like I had anything all that important to say, and I was dealt instead in terms of asking questions. I was doing talk radio out here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and I was talking on the phone with the sorts of conservative, Christian, fundamentalist, evangelical, traditional people who live on the south side of the Mason-Dixon line and were part of the Confederacy, having conversations with them about things, some of which had to do with our common humanity, but some of which had to do with what their system of values was, divided conservatives like them from people like me. What I said at that time was, let's talk to each other in a spirit of genuine inquiry and mutual respect, as if we might actually learn from each other. Well, but then there came a time in 2004 when I saw the destructive force taking over conservative America, a force of fascism. I saw that American democracy was under profound threat. And I had been in a very positive project of mapping the sacred, but I saw this danger in 2004. I saw something at some point. I'll tell you about the experience in which I understood that something very dark and was rising on the right had to be confronted and dealt with. So I've spent, I've been much more focused over the last almost 20 years on the battle to save American democracy than I have been about that bigger picture thing that I came to in 1970. It's that book over there is the fruit of a visionary moment that actually delivered. It's something that I can use my intellect and that's what I did. And it shows that the human story has to be understood in very different terms than we have so far. We haven't really understood the ramifications of the extraordinary step our species took when we extricated ourselves from the niche in which we had evolved biologically by inventing our own way of life. That is a crucial moment we haven't looked at very moment, but the whole destiny of the species as it embarks on the path of civilization is inevitably shaped by a dynamic that isn't a function of the nature of that creature. So I can prove, to my satisfaction, in a very systematic way, that the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature writ large. Well, as it turns out, both of these things are part of the same coherent whole. There is at the heart of the human drama, there are a couple of forces that are contending to see whether things get more whole or more broken. And I believe that I can show that. I've been working on this stuff for over 50 years, and at the age of almost getting closer to 78 than I am to 77, I've put together something which I feel, and it's embarrassing to say this. I mean, it's awkward to say this, but when I introduced this better human story, this integrative vision on daily costs, during the fall, I prefaced it with an introductory piece, which was subtitled something about an integrative an integrative vision that might help human civilization survive. It does have some of those possibilities because it does have the benefit of putting what kind of creatures we are, and it's important how we understand ourselves, and putting how we understand the history that we have been enacting, and how we understand what it is we need to accomplish if human civilization is going to survive for the long haul. Instead of culminating the human story in some self-inflicted catastrophe, which is a very real possibility as I see it. And everything that we hold dear, valuable, sacred, whatever, everything is at stake. And whether we win a kind of a battle between two coherent forces that I claim I can show, one of which consistently spreads a pattern of brokenness, so that brokenness begets brokenness begets brokenness, and you can see it happening in the realm of cause and effect in the human world. So that you can see how it is that something like this force of fascism might arise on the right. Well, I've been very frustrated for most of those almost 20 years by how little liberal America could see of what it was that was rising. I wrote a few thousand pieces to several thousand people a day during that whole W period on my website, nonesoblind.org, which you can find on my present website. There's a portal into that. Trying to alert liberal America to what was right in front of our eyes that was emerging, the consistency with which this Republican Party was doing things that made things worse. I mean, it was a consistency which called upon us to see there's something here that's rising, and eventually, I'm not feeling that kind of frustration now. The second coming or the third coming of Donald Trump, by the time we've reached this point, liberal America does seem awakened. The ugliness is visible when you've got somebody talking about vermin and poisoning the blood and dictator for a day and committing serious crimes right in front of our eyes. It is very difficult not to see that this is not American politics as usual, but it is a life and death struggle of American democracy to preserve itself from a force of brokenness that we can call fascism, or that we can call authoritarianism, or strongman rule, or tyranny, or what's the other? Not totalitarianism, it doesn't go that far. But whatever we want to call it, it is a representative of a well-known dark side of a spectrum about how civilized societies can govern themselves. On one side of the spectrum is the idea that the will of the people is ultimately what dictates the course of the civilization, making government their instrument. Whereas the other side of the other pole is that the power of the state is invested in something which is not answerable to the people, but on the contrary, is able to exploit, to manipulate the people. That's the choice that we've got in this current election. That is fundamentally, I mean, whatever else you want to say about the enormous contrast between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and it would be kind of fun to talk about all the dimensions in which they're kind of opposites. I mean, whether Biden is always making the right decisions or not, I don't think there's any room for doubt that he is continually taking with utmost seriousness the responsibility for using his office to advance things that he think are in the national interest and the interest of the American people. I don't see how you can doubt. Donald Trump is obviously just the opposite. I mean, here's a guy who so openly is willing to destroy anything that if destroying it will lead to his getting more of what he wants. He's willing to sell out Ukraine in order to get some dishonest and illegal help in besmirching what he thought would be his, rightly apparently, be his opponent in 2020. I mean, the pandemic, I mean, this guy is willing to sacrifice anything. He has no sense of responsibility. So there's so many opposites, but the fundamental opposite here is that the American people are going to be choosing between two fundamentally different paths. The path of democracy, the rule of law, constitution, power being answerable to the people, or to the opposites of all those. That's the nature of the choice. And Biden versus Trump isn't about whether or not Joe Biden is the ideal person to be representing democracy by a whole set of historical circumstances and by the decision of Joe Biden. And I have my trepidations about that, but I think it's quite possible that he made the right decision in terms of maximizing the chance that democracy is going to win this battle. But I think that, I wish he were younger. I wish I were younger, but I do recognize that that's a negative. But the stakes are basically everything. I hadn't been for Joe Biden in 2019-20, but until it became obvious that the only chance we had to defeat Donald Trump that was left, and Bernie Sanders, whatever one felt about him, that was a huge risk to take. And it seemed a whole lot smarter to the Democratic base altogether. You could see that clearly, to go with Joe Biden. So at that point, I became a major supporter of Joe Biden. And I've actually been pleasantly surprised at the competence of his administration of this presidency. He has accomplished a lot, and what has accomplished has been substantially a function of his understanding how the system works and having pretty good judgment about how to get it to work, to achieve his ends. I would have him calling out the Republicans more vigorously. I have always been, throughout this era, about the need to call out what is rising on the right. in 2014, I published, and you can find it on my website, betterhumanstory.org. You can find my a series that I wrote called Press the Battle, which was a very big picture thing. And it was about the need for liberal America to fight this thing, to see it for what it is, which was something far darker than you would think that would infer that the Democrats saw it from the way some of them would talk about our friends across the aisle. I mean, whatever they were doing as human beings on a face-to-face basis, they were soldiers supporting a force that was making everything more broken. Wherever you look, they were going to make widen the gap between the of inequalities of wealth and power. They were going to exacerbate race relations. They were going to subvert the attempt to deal with the climate crisis. You could see that there was something happening here, and the failure to fight it early has put us in the position that we are in now. I think that if liberal America hadn't had its defects, that I'll make a separate video because I've really given a lot of thought to why is it that liberal America, which is so full of intelligence and so full of basic decent human goodness and decency, why is it that they weren't able to see what was rising? And why was it that even to the extent that they did see it, they were loath to confront it in the way that it needed to be confronted? And I've got a video that I made. It's one of the ones I feel best about. I think the title is the long-standing liberal pattern of weakness. And I go back to 1980 and I talk about a whole variety of places where liberal America failed to stand up and fight a hardball fight against a force that was waging a hardball fight, starting with making the Supreme Court what the Republicans decided they wanted it to be, and not being matched by similar, that's back in the 1980s. But anyway, so you might go take a look at that. But finally, it's visible. Donald Trump is, Tricky Dick Nixon hid a lot of ugly brokenness. Donald Trump puts it right in everybody's face all the time. So here we are. We're engaged in a campaign to save American democracy, and it's going to be Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And here's where I actually, one place where I feel like I still have maybe something to contribute to that battle, because the awakening has occurred. I think that we need to look at the fact that it is essential that as much of the American people as possible perceive the election in those terms. That's what it is. But Americans have not putting aside the Trump cult people, that's a whole different question. But there are a lot of people out there who have the capacity. They're not captured and put into a trance by that fascistic force, but they don't perceive it for what it is. And so that means that there is the election is going to be decided by what proportion of the American electorate, and we've got to get more than 50% because of the damn electoral college, but what proportion of the American electorate is going to lend its political support to fascism. And that's going to depend on how, I think, ultimately, I think the bulk of the American people, if they see what the election is about, will reject Donald Trump and that fascistic force that he represents. And I think that is good news. But a lot of people might not perceive that their choice in that way. So everything needs to be done that's possible to make the American people, as many as possible, have as big an impact as possible to move those who might not see it to seeing it. And that is the function of political rhetoric and propaganda, speeches, a campaign, bought advertisements. And in all these realms, it's going to be very important to do as much as we can to reach and move those Americans who might go to the polls. And I'm optimistic that it can be done, and that if it is accomplished, the American people are going to reject fascism. In order to vote for Donald Trump, people have either got to be in favor of the fascistic kind of strongman government that Trump is openly promising or threatening America with. You know, he'll go after his political opponents with the Department of Justice. He'll do what he accuses Biden's DOJ, quite falsely, obviously falsely. He accuses them of going after him for political purposes. But he's telling us that as president, he will use the legal system, the law enforcement system, the way the Nazis did, you know, a Gestapo that's basically representing the interests of the regime and not governed by the rule of law. I don't think the bulk of the American people want that. You know, sometimes I overestimate the American people. I recognize that, but I think we've seen it in recent elections too. I think the majority of Americans are rejecting these various forms of brokenness that we see, and that's included, I think, in that is the reaction to that theocratic, fascistic Dobbs decision that Justice Alito wrote overturning Roe versus Wade. It's really part of the same picture, I think. And with abortion, I think it's about 2/3. Sometimes I think that the Democrats should be shooting for getting 2/3 of the vote in 2024, because 1/3 has to be written off, but go for the other people that are what the ad campaign should look like, so that when people are watching their TV, they'll see something which is like as well designed as possible to move those people more in the direction so that when they go to cast their vote, they're thinking, Donald Trump represents the overthrow of American democracy. As an American patriot, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, who is the means by which we will preserve American democracy. But I hope there are some smart people working on that question. I know there are going to be other things that's decided on. You know, I know you can't ignore all the other issues, but that one is so fundamental, and maybe that can be conveyed too. I mean, if you lose in that on that level, every other issue that's going to come up, so long as we have lost our democracy, is going to be dealt with in a more broken way. It is a gateway to darkness, and that's part of what needs to be. For people to be, you know, people how many people understand in their guts what it would mean to be to live under something like a Vladimir Putin or a Hitler uh, or even that guy in Turkey or Modi's regime? How many people feel in their guts that we don't want to go down that trail to where there are torture chambers or government ordered exterminations? How many people? I don't know. But I think that most Americans, if they saw what their choices are, would reject fascism. The other thing, somebody who votes for Trump has to do either they want the fascism or they can't see that that's what Trump represents. I mean, it's hard. I have tried hard and have failed, as far as I'm concerned, to understand how is it that intelligent people don't see what's right in front of their faces. And it is really kind of mind-blowing that people can believe Trump's lies. I mean, here's on one side, we've got this guy who is the greatest, most consistent, thoroughgoing, pathological liar in human history, as far as I know. And he tells people, the election was stolen from me, and oh, this is all the prosecutions of me are politically motivated, when he committed crimes right in front of our eyes. They reportedly believe that, and in spite of like huge mountains of evidence that on each one of those it's a lie. The election wasn't stolen. He was the one who was trying to steal the election. Couldn't be clearer. Intelligent people not seeing it. Well, anyway, it's hard for me to accept that that these people don't see it. I had a real connection with a certain part of this conservative Shenandoah Valley culture from doing hundreds of hours of meaningful conversation on the radio, and I had a real feeling, and it is disturbing as well as bewildering to me to watch people that I've seen and as being having certain really fine virtues as well as intelligence attach themselves to a man who has no virtues and who asks them to believe things that intelligence would easily show are false. I mean, of course, he lost the election. No election in American history has been so fully established to be a valid election as the one that elected Joe Biden and made Trump a loser. The first loser in American history who wouldn't even admit his defeat. After over 200 years, here's this guy do that. And these people are going off with them. So I can't accept that. I don't understand it. But I apply such resources as I've got. I have a lifetime of experience of trying to say things to people that often were things that were not generally known, because that's sort of what I'm drawn to do, is to say something that people don't already, people should hear, rather than just confirm what we all think. But I have a platform out here in the Shenandoah Valley. a newspaper called the Northern Virginia Daily, publishes an op-ed from me every week. And down in Lynchburg, Virginia, the newspaper there likewise prints my, that's where Liberty University is. That there is there's a population there that is intensely read. And a platform where I can put something on their Sunday breakfast table every week. And likewise up here in the northern part of the Shenandoah Valley. I don't have access to conservative America. I mean, I would love to be in the position Rush Limbaugh was in, to be able to talk to a whole slice of the American electorate and poison their minds. I would love to have a big platform where all the decent and intelligent people who are supporting this indecent thing that's treating them like fools. If I could, but my mom was a theater person. She taught me something which has really done me in good stead as a marginal person. She said, there are no small parts. There are only small actors. It really is true. It means even if you're swinging for, like the big time, filling Carnegie Hall, anytime you play, it's a chance to make beautiful music. So, I had in the 90s, I had this, I wanted to counter what I saw Rush Limbaugh doing to the American consciousness. He was bringing out, feeding the worst in parts of the people on the American right, feeding their resentments and arrogance, and feelings of contempt, and their proclivity to deal with things in black and white terms and not to be able to take in contrary pieces. Some of the problems that you often see on the conservative side in any society, he fed them. I wanted to get, but I did get a chance to establish a community of discourse with these people. I loved what that allowed us to find together, to create together. It was the only time in my life where I actually felt like I was playing a meaningful role in my community. I've always been sort of off in the wilderness guy, marginal, not entirely by choice, but always devoting myself, except for, I think 7 years since I graduated from college, over 55, I've gotten a paycheck. But basically, I've been kind of a lone wolf, and it was meaningful to me to be with these people and create something good that became part of the, a small part of the culture of the Shenandoah Valley. But you do what you can do, and that's what I do with my weekly op-eds. Most of them I write with the thought of this is a message to those people that used to have this fine feeling with. People I've had a real deep respect for and a fondness. And so I do try to say something that would get past whatever that is, which I don't understand, that enables them to see things the way they are, or the way they do, when that is so obviously the very opposite of the reality. that they are supporting not a man who's being who from whom the election was stolen, but on the contrary, they're supporting a man who has made an effort all the way up to a violent coup d'état to steal the election. They're not supporting a man who's being unjustly prosecuted by a politically motivated Justice Department. They're supporting a guy who has really compelled the reluctant Department of Justice to prosecute him because he drove things to such an extent that not to prosecute him would do substantial damage to the rule of law. We would never again be able to say that in America, no one is above the law. And that is a fundamental thing to be able to say. So every week I put something out there. Sometimes I speak about human interest stuff. But I'll say something like I have a piece in tomorrow's newspaper, which is about the problem of technology taking jobs away from people. And I start with something you might not think of it in that way, which is the role of the storyteller. The oral tradition that was handed down from generation to generation in a whole diversity of cultures, so that the treasure of the culture gets mastered by a certain people playing a certain important role in the society. And then comes this new technology of writing. Things get written down. My understanding is that that Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are considered two magnificent masterpieces, was not so much the composition of an epic poet, but was the creation of generations of storytellers, keepers of the oral tradition, who mastered and injected into it their own artistry. And I think that I understand that the Bible, or some important parts of the Bible, were subjected to some of that same oral for a goodly long time before it ends up getting written. Anyway, that's just basically I'm trying to say that something between me and the op-ed audience, and something between me and you, that. Between that, I want to occasionally talk to them as fellow human beings. I don't want to just be challenging them and having them see me also as they were wont to do, as this guy on the evil side. So I, for example, have written about something that was meaningful to me, and apparently was meaningful to a lot of people out there, regardless of their politics, about high school reunions. And I wrote something recently about the death of my best friend in high school, just this summer before our 60th high school reunion. And I'm a person too. Is part of the thing. But what I want to say to you, who I hope you will subscribe to to me. I don't know how I'm supposed to say these things. Like and subscribe, I guess, is what I'm supposed to say. That I will be talking a lot about these serious things, about saving American democracy, and about the larger picture of the challenge that our species faces. That we've got a lot of ugliness in the human world, and we need to understand it in a different way. And here's a set of ideas which will put into us fundamentally different light who we are, what our history is, and what we got to do. So, in addition to those, I think about other things as well, and there's an answer. There's an area where I'm back to sort of thinking I'm asking questions because I've come up with a title, and this is a preview of a coming attraction. I don't know if I'll do it later today or think about it more or whatever, but I'm aging. And the people that with whom I have shared my life over the long stretches of time, they're aging too, and it's become the fact of aging has become an important part of our lives. Our own experience, what's happening to other people, making plans for what the road ahead inevitably entails. It is a stage of life. I am fortunately in a position where I am not feeling incapable. Fundamentally, I still feel capable, but I'm having to confront that the knowledge that that is not a permanent condition. That got somebody who's important in my life, who's 3.5 years older than me, says, "Oh, I hit 80. I lost a lot." And anyway, I don't know how to think, how to feel about aging. And my sense is that there are a lot of people who are dealing with some of that kind of an issue too. And I might be able to, find ways of talking about it that are interesting as I struggle to sort of come to terms with something which doesn't entirely fit with my sense of how things are supposed to be. I'm supposed to be permanent. That's how I feel about it. It's kind of hard to get it through my head. But and another preview of coming attractions, just which also will show that in this better human story, I'm trying to integrate a whole lot of dimensions of the human world and of human experience into it. I want to talk about a subject which is interested in me since maybe my whole life, but there was a stage in my mid-teens. It's got to do with sexuality. Trying to understand why sexuality in the human world seems like is generally beset by complications. There are difficulties around it. How come? Anyway, I have some thoughts about the how come. Got so 3 different layers: an animal layer, a human layer, and then a civilization layer. Explanations why human sexuality is part of the whole domain of things that are part of us and of our lives that seems to be more challenging than a lot of others. So those are things that you can look forward to if you're interested. The human world is just incredibly rich and multidimensional. And I've worked hard in an obsessive, intellectual, thinky guy kind of a way to come up with putting as much together as possible. I think it's important to see things whole. important at a variety of levels, including enriching our experience, but also making us more effective in trying to get our world into a more whole place where democracy in America is safe and where human civilization is moving toward being what it needs to be if it's going to survive for the long haul. And we've got a lot to do. And in my mind, it's kind of a toss-up. Whether I'm optimistic about the election, but the election isn't going to end America's troubled status. And I think it's a toss-up in terms of human civilization, whether we're going to make it, destroy ourselves. And what happens in America is a part of that battle. That's seeing things whole. Is the battle between the forces that would lead to our self-destruction, and the battles that would have to govern the course that we take as a species if we were to put ourselves together in the way we need to survive for the long haul. That battle is where was I going? Well, one of the things I'm going to be trying to do in these videos is doing conversation more or less like jazz. I've spent my life being a guy who presents things like in the Parable of the Tribes and what we're up against over there, a very systematic way. I try to go in a way that basically leaves people no option but to be compelled to certain conclusions because the logic and the evidence drive them in that direction. That's what I was trained in. But I'm enjoying a new medium. And by the way, I do sort of the same thing in the op-eds. I mean, I draft everything 10 times to make it really well crafted. That's sort of like taking ideas and writing them as if to be put to Bach's music. But here I want to be free to do jazz. I hope that works okay. I mean, I don't know. I don't plan exactly where I'm going to go. I have a trust that the ways things that connect will have a logic of their own. To actually convey my better human story in a fully systematic way involves assembling a lot of pieces. And I'm really, really, really hoping that some people are up for doing that kind of work to see how these various pieces all fit together and show some fundamental things about the whole human situation. But I know that takes a certain amount of work. I mean, how many people would really care to see if it could be shown that the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature writ large? How many people would really be motivated to see, if it were true, that any creature on any planet, anywhere in the cosmos, that embarks on the path of civilization, which is to say, extricates itself from the niche in which it evolved biologically by inventing its own way of life, an unprecedented step. Any such creature that embarks on that path will inevitably find itself swept up in a social evolutionary process that it didn't choose and it couldn't avoid, and which enthrones what I call the spirit of the gangster to have a disproportionate say in how that creature's civilization would evolve. Would you want to know if that could be shown to be true? It takes I mean, I do show it to be true, but in terms of writing it out like Bach's music, which I do in the, I get confused, the Parable of the Tribes. I mean, I lay it out. There's no way of escaping its logic that I've been able to discover. But that does take some work. And by the way, I have tried to lay it out in a video that's on my YouTube site called something about the reign of power, or the inevitable, I don't know, the inevitable reign of power in when civilization evolves. I can't remember what the title is, but if you want to get it by YouTube, you can do that. But anyway, in these things, it's more like jazz, and it's an attempt to employ a different mode of thinking, which is associational and connectee, that shows the wholeness of the landscape, but sort of enlightening, the flash of lightning of, oh yeah, this is connected with that. Yeah, the struggle for American democracy's survival against Donald Trump can be understood as a function of a battle that actually emerged with the beginnings of civilization, where a force of brokenness inevitably emerges out of the unprecedented situation that the unprecedented step of inventing one's way of life unleashes. The evolutionary perspective is at some ultimate level what I'm trying to sell here, that our species' story grows out of an evolutionary process that created us. I've been saying 3.5 billion years of life's the evolution leading to this moment. But there's an unprecedented step that got taken when a creature, for the very first time, leaves the natural order that has been selected for by natural selection. I mean, what I say is the lion and the zebra and the grass work together to create a perpetual motion machine, even as they devour each other. That's an order which is selected for. What gets selected for is not just, individual creatures. What gets selected for is systems that work for the long haul. They're the ones that, the smooth off the edges as the best as it can be done by a process that continually chooses what can get its DNA into the future over what cannot. That's evolution. And it creates an order where there's a kind of regulation of the interaction among all the elements. But with the emergence of an invented form of human life, which is embarking on the path of civilization, that is something which hasn't been created by natural selection. That's something that was invented, whether it goes gardening and herding, agriculture, and all those things. That's no longer continuous with what we had been for those millions of years as primate bands that became, with a common ancestor as a chimpanzee and onward. always living in the same basic size and structure and means of subsistence. But here now something is being changed in a way that had not happened before, which is an unprecedented step, which leads to an unprecedented disorder where the interactions among the elements is not regulated by any life-serving system. That's a first. It creates a situation which is best described by the word anarchy. And the anarchy inevitably generates what Hobbes, the philosopher of anarchy, called a war of all against all. And that leads to a selective process. The dynamic of the system generates a systemic force, a selective force, which is continuously selecting among the various cultural options non-randomly. Namely, for those cultural options which allow a society to prevail in a war of all against all. It doesn't have to do with the nature of the creature. That's why we know that the ugliness we see in human history, it was mandated by the nature of the anarchic situation into which civilization inevitably emerges at the outset. And the question is, do you overcome that anarchy in time to prevent self-destruction? Well, Putin's invasion of Ukraine is a clear indication that we have not succeeded well enough yet in overcoming that anarchy. And gaining control over the spirit of the gangster, like Putin, that's plagued human civilization from the beginning, from the tyrannies of the Mesopotamia and the pharaohs of Egypt and the kings of the Aztec Empire and all that stuff across the planet. The spirit of the tyrant. And here we are in America with a would-be tyrant having emerged as a powerful player in the struggle for power in America. The force that gets inevitably unleashed as soon as a creature steps across that threshold into inventing his own way of life, the force that unleashes feeds through the human system over the generations and centuries and millennia and leads to certain kinds of crises where the battle is gained with a special intensity. When fascism arose, well, first in Italy and Japan, but then in Germany, and especially in Germany, and set the whole world in a global scale battle over what kind of whether wholeness or brokenness is going to govern the human world. That's a moment of focus in a battle that you can see stretching back to the beginnings of civilization. The evolutionary perspective shows that the step out of the natural order crafted by natural selection, the choice continuously over what works for the long haul over what can't get its DNA into the long haul. That struggle is departing from that is unleashes into the human world a force that consistently makes the human world worse and can be seen operating in the network of cause and effect where one form of brokenness like a war can lead to another form of brokenness like an injustice and so on. The evolutionary perspective reveals that the step onto the path of civilization inevitably generates something that behaves the way evil, the force of evil, has traditionally been understood. There is something which is coherent. It is consistent in making the world more broken. It doesn't have any supernatural being, But I think that the evolutionary perspective on what happens when a creature steps across, becomes civilization creating, that perspective shows that a force of evil, you don't have to call it that, but it really does fit, inevitably emerges. And if you look at the way in which something like a Donald Trump threat to American democracy has emerged in America over the last generation, and that has been what has visibly happened. You start with Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich, and you add Fox News, and you've got a Supreme Court that's moving in a certain direction, and you've got the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and you've got W, and you've got lies that drive us into a war in Iraq, and you can just see, and then you've got the across the board obstructionism of Barack Obama for 8 years, and robbing him of the power to make America better. And then you've got Donald Trump hijacking the Republican Party. You can see it unfolding. And if you trace, how did that happen? You can see various components of American brokenness coming together. The racism, the corporate greed, the American imperialism, the parts of the culture that have been socialized to believe the lie that's told to them by authority of a certain kind. Like the lies about the nature of the Civil War, what the Confederacy was about, and all that. They've been trained to take in lies. That's a form of brokenness. And you can see how these things came together and gained power over the American right. And as for liberal America, it's been terribly slow to join the battle and press the battle. But now it is, and it needs to do it some more. And that's why I think one thing I've got to suggest we need those Democrats in the best position to impact the American people with words about this election and the choice between, to get people to experience, yes, this is between the better kind of society our framers wanted to give us, that didn't have dungeons and cruel, unusual punishments and searches and seizures without warrants and all the rest of those nightmares. We want people to understand that, and we don't have a president, unfortunately, whose gifts include the ability to move people, moving people. I wish I were better at it, because like I say, I've had a whole lifetime of trying to move people, usually moving their thoughts. But with that, if the thoughts are deep enough, a lot should move with it. But anyway, that's what we need to do for this election. We need to move people, and Joe Biden is, I think, has done a great job in a whole lot of ways, but he is one of the least capable compared with Obama, compared with Clinton, certainly compared with FDR or Winston Churchill. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a liberal leader who could talk like FDR, who was beset by enemies in 36 and said, "I welcome their hatred, these malefactors of great wealth," a fighter like him. But even more so, wouldn't it be great if we had a Winston Churchill who could summon his nation at a very dark time, and they were under enormous peril from the Nazis across the Channel, and summon them to play the role of heroes, to rise up to meet the threat of fascism in their time. I would like the pro-democracy side, especially Democratic leaders, I suppose, but I think we could enlist a whole lot of other people. What's his name? Stewart. The day. What was it? John Stewart. All these late night. Well, I don't know, but people who can deliver a strong message. And I think I'm thinking of some Democratic politicians that are well positioned in terms of their standing with the American people, and who have the understanding of the nature of our crisis, and have some oratorical abilities that could stand up at the before the microphones and make a speech to the nation in some way. Maybe at the Democratic National Convention this could happen. A maximally impactful speech delivered in a maximally impactful rhetorical way to move the maximal possible number of Americans into understanding the importance of voting for Joe Biden in order to save American democracy from being overthrown by fascism, which is also to save the American people from living under a darkness that our founders sought to protect us from. So let's work on getting those speeches made in all the right ways, in all the right times, in all the right places, by all the right people. I've got some people in mind. I will do what I can to communicate with them. Love the order of life. I love what human beings at their best are. I feel that anything I can do that could even have a minimal impact on what might happen in a toss-up, I got to do. I wouldn't be doing this at this age. If I didn't feel like it was a kind of a now or never thing, it was, a decision I sort of came to about whether to resign myself to not having gotten this better human story out there far enough. And my son, who recognizes and supports my sense that there's something here that shouldn't die with me, is the one that's been pushing me into these forums of the 21st century. First, he got me to do podcasting as a guest on other people's shows, which I threw myself into completely. And now he's got me doing these YouTubes. And I hope that there are people who are interested in seeing something important and valid about our situation that I've labored hard to put together. And at the least, I hope you'll follow me here on YouTube, where I'll suggest this integrative vision in a jazz-like way. But abetterhumanstory.org is where you can get that integrated picture in a systematic way. Well, thank you for listening if you have. And I'll be back talking about human sexuality in a short while.